Over the last couple of years in football, we have seen some crazy snow games. I mean, literally in this past weekend alone, I watched as Indiana took on Purdue in near whiteout conditions at kickoff, and then we saw tonight on Sunday Night Football, the Bills had a crazy snow game. This led me to think it was the perfect time to drop an old script I wrote a couple months ago about 10 of the most memorable snow games in recent memory. That's exactly what we're going to do in today's video, as we're going to go back in time and talk about some of the best moments in college football and the NFL in the snow in recent memory. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's get started and talk about the 10 most memorable snow games in recent memory. So the first one I want to talk about is really in recent memory, as it was back in 2023. It was Iowa State versus Kansas State. This is an old rivalry game, and this was some of the worst snow that Kansas had seen in a long time. Snowfall was actually so bad across the state that the stadium was only about half full, and the seats in the upper deck had about 4 inches of standing snow on them at kickoff. K-State came into the game ranked number 19th in the country, and were looking for their 9th win, but Iowa State managed to win based on big plays. Their touchdowns on the day consisted of a 71-yard run by Abu Sama, a 77-yard run by Sama, a 60-yard run by Sama, 2 Jaden Higgins touchdown passes, and a Jalen Knoll touchdown pass. They only scored on whiff tackles due to K-State not being prepared for the snow, and it was enough for them to hold Will Howard from making a fourth quarter comeback and winning 42-35. Abu Sama alone ran for 276 yards and 3 touchdowns on just 16 carries. If it wasn't snowing, K-State would have probably won, but since it was, it created one of the most fun games and results of college football in the entire 2023 season. The second snow game I want to talk about is Michigan State versus Penn State back in 2021. This is one of the more crazy white death games we have seen, as it came between the Spartans and Nittany Lions. Sparty was 9-2 and hoping for a miracle in the Big Ten East, and Penn State was 6-5 looking to cause chaos on the road, wearing an all-white uniform set. The result was Jahan Dotson and Kenneth Walker solidifying themselves as some of the best weapons in the country, and Michigan State started out fast with a 14-0 lead, but Penn State quickly followed suit to tie in the second quarter thanks to 2 Sean Clifford touchdown passes to Dotson. A field goal kept Michigan State ahead at the half, but Penn State scored a pick 6 to start the third quarter, and Sparty had to respond with a late touchdown of their own to keep ahead. They eventually pulled away with a late touchdown in the fourth, and Penn State's comeback attempt fell short, leading Michigan State to win 30-27. Clifford would throw for 313 yards and 3 touchdowns, with 137 of those yards going to Dotson. For Michigan State, Thorne's pick 6 was offset by 2 passing TDs and 138 rushing yards and a touchdown by Kenneth Walker. I still remember this game like it was yesterday, but somehow it was 3 years ago. Okay, so another really fun one is the Bills versus the Colts back in 2017. Normally, a late season game between the 3-10 Colts and the 7-6 Buffalo Bills wouldn't be too interesting for NFL fans, but sheets of thick snow and windy conditions ended up making it one of the most fun football games of the 2017 NFL season. A total of 32 passes were thrown between Jacoby Brissett and Nathan Peterman, with under 120 yards and 2 touchdowns between the two of them. The real stars of the show were the running backs, Frank Gore and LaShawn McCoy. After a first quarter where drives continued to go nowhere, the Bills finally managed to score first with under 30 seconds left in the first half on an 8-yard pass from Peterman to Kelvin Benjamin. The third quarter would return the favor, with no red zone success for either team until the fourth, when the Colts would tie it up with a 3-yard touchdown pass to tight end Jack Doyle, leading into a 7-7 overtime. In overtime, they ended up having a 21-yard run to seal up for the Bills, and then Vinatieri missed 2 kicks for the Colts, but Frank Gore finished with 130 yards on 36 carries. Shady would finish the day with 156 yards on 32 carries with a touchdown as well. Another one that is super memorable is the Raiders at Patriots, aka the Tuck Rule game back in 2002. In terms of snow games, the 2001 AFC Championship between the Raiders and Patriots is important for everything except for the snow. Rich Gannon and Tom Brady struggled to find the end zone through the air, but still passed it a lot. Tom Brady threw 52 total passes and Gannon threw 31, with both running games being pretty stuffed in the snow. Charlie Garner of the Raiders ran for 64 yards on 17 carries, and Antoine Smith ran for 65 on 20 carries. David Patton was the leading receiver on the day with 107 yards for the Pats, and Jerry Rice led the Raiders with 48 yards of his own. But this game is most memorable for the Tuck Rule called on Tom Brady late in the game. During a tackle, he appeared to fumble and the Raiders would pick it up. This game was tied at 13, so the Raiders would have had the opportunity to score with less than 2 minutes left. But after review, it was called an incomplete forward pass. The Patriots pushed forward and scored a field goal to win the game. They'll go on to win the 2001 Super Bowl and kickstart their legacy as the most dominant team of the 2000s and 2010s with their first Super Bowl win. There was a lot of snow going on, but nobody really remembers that. In 1982, we had what was called the Snow Plow game, as it was the Miami Dolphins versus the New England Patriots. The Dolphins traveled to New England for a regular season game against the Pats in 1982 that featured a whole bunch of snow on the ground. The Dolphins were projected to win the game behind the arm of David Woodley, and the Patriots were set to trot out Steve Grogan to toss in the snow. Neither quarterback could handle the ball in the cold very well, though, with Woodley going 9 of 18 for 76 yards and 2 picks, and Grogan only throwing the ball 5 times for 2 completions and 13 yards with a pick. Running backs of both teams had 100 rushing yards, and New England's backup had 81 yards. Neither team had scored, but what made this game memorable was the fact that late in the game and needing a field goal, New England got creative help to help themselves win the game. A man on the sidelines was running a snowplow to keep the lines visible for players, and the Patriots actually got the man to use his snowplow on the part of the field where they were kicking, so they weren't kicking in the snow. The fresh spot made it easier for New England to kick the eventual game-winning field goal. They won 3-0. Another interesting game is the Ice Bowl back in 1967, and that was the Cowboys against the Packers. There might not have been a more famous snow game than the 1967 NFL Championship game between the Cowboys and the Packers. Nicknamed the Ice Bowl due to negative 50-degree wind chill, it was so cold in Green Bay that Lambeau Field's grass heating system malfunctioned, and the mouthpieces of the band scheduled the play, and the referees' whistles literally froze to their lips. Multiple people would suffer hypothermia because of the game, and a few people actually died in the stands. The Packers shot out immediately to a 14-0 lead over the Cowboys, who were not used to the cold weather, but 2 Packer fumbles would allow them to get back in the game, and they were down 10-14 at the half. With just under 4 minutes left in the game, the Packers were down 14-17, but Bart Starr led the Packers downfield methodically until they were down to the goal line. They had 2 handoffs to break through and it didn't work, and they were down to their last timeout, but the Packers called for a block to give it to their fullback. But Starr decided to keep the ball at the last second and scored the game-winning touchdown. It still exists today as one of the most famous games in NFL history. Going back over to the college ranks, we have to talk about the 2000 Independence Bowl between Mississippi State and Texas A&M. Typically, bowl games don't see much snow since they're played in warmer climates. Texas A&M and Mississippi State, though, especially don't see snow during their seasons. But what made the 2000 Independence Bowl between them so interesting was that it was snowing during the game in Shreveport, Louisiana. It was so weird for it to be snowing at the game that it was nicknamed the Snow Bowl by fans. It started snowing just before kickoff, surprising a lot of the 37,000 fans that made the trip, and Mississippi State was also being led by Jackie Sherrill at head coach, who had formerly been Texas A&M's head coach until 1989 when he resigned due to NCAA violations. What made the game more fun was that it was an offensive shootout that ended in overtime based on a blocked extra point that was returned for 2 and set up a game-winning Bulldog drive from quarterback Wayne Madkin. Jamar Toombs for Texas A&M had over 200 yards rushing with 3 touchdowns, and Mississippi State would end up winning 43-41 in one of the most exciting offensive and defensive shootouts of the 2000 bowl season that year. Staying in the year 2000, we need to talk about K-State versus Nebraska. 2000 saw another close game played in the snow when Nebraska would travel south to Manhattan, Kansas to take on K-State. Nebraska, led by Heisman candidate Eric Crouch, was 8-1 entering the game, and K-State was 8-2. Nebraska shut out quickly with a touchdown on a blocked punt, and throwing was nearly impossible for the Huskers since Crouch ended up going 2 of 13 for 39 yards and a pick. But the ground game would work just fine, as Dan Alexander ran for 130 yards on 18 carries with 2 scores, and Crouch also ran the ball for a touchdown. But K-State ran right alongside him. Josh Scobie ran for 62 yards and a touchdown, and Jonathan Beasley threw for 234 yards and 2 scores with a pick as well. But the game was decided on defense, as Nebraska was able to shut down K-State's running game, but couldn't do much to stop Beasley throughout the air when it mattered. The Cats scored late to go up 29-28 in the final minutes, and then a well-defended pass fell short. This was the biggest win K-State had ever had against the Huskers, and proved to be one of the more interesting snow games in college football history. Okay, so we have 2 more games currently, but before we talk about them, be sure to take a quick moment to leave a like button and let me know what snow game I missed. Okay, so I honestly don't know if there are more rivalry games that get as many neutral viewers as Army-Navy. It gets both its own week and a lot of airtime due to the history between the game, which is what made the 2017 version of the rivalry game so interesting. Not only was it between an 8-3 Army and a 6-5 Navy team, but it was snowing in sheets. A total of 2 passes were thrown the entire game, 1 for each team. The game started with an early Army touchdown, followed by a Navy field goal at the end of the first quarter. Navy returned fire with a 68-yard touchdown run by Malcolm Perry to make it 10-7. and then they stretched their lead to 13 with another field goal in the third. But Army had stormed back with a short touchdown run in the fourth, and they took the lead. With just a few seconds left, Navy marched down the field, but missed the last-second field goal to win it. Malcolm Perry had ran for 250 yards and a touchdown on 30 carries. It was just a crazy triple option game, and there was snow everywhere. Okay, so the final game we're going to talk about is the 2018 Apple Cup between Washington and Washington State. Going into the game, the two teams were leading the Pac-12 North, as Washington was 8-3 and ranked number 16 in the country, and Wazoo was 10-1, ranked 8th in the country, pushing for a college football playoff spot. Throwing was extremely difficult, as Wazoo's Gardner Minshew would end the day with 150 yards and 2 interceptions, while Washington's Jake Browning had over 200 yards and a pick. Washington State even had a defensive 2-point conversion on a Washington touchdown, bringing the score 20-9 in the third quarter. But Washington didn't run the air raid like Wazoo did, so they were able to lean on running back Myles Gaskin in the snow, who put up 170 yards and 3 touchdowns, including a breakaway 80-yard touchdown run late in the game to seal it. He wasn't the only Husky with a lot of rushing yards, as Salvon Ahmed ran for 87 yards on 9 carries. It had huge implications on the Pac-12 and playoff race, essentially kicking Wazoo out of the running entirely and allowing Washington to take over as the winners of the Pac-12 North, and they later won the Pac-12 by beating Utah in the championship game. So yeah, today we talked about 10 of the most memorable snow games in both NFL and college football history, and if there's a game I missed, be sure to let me know down below, and if we get 10 good examples, I can go ahead and make a part 2. But what do you guys think? As I said, be sure to leave a like if you want to support today's video. Let me know your thoughts down below, and check out all my other videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.